Thanks everybody to join another Nolte Lightning Talk. My name is Gabriela Suarez, Gabi Suarez. I'm the People and Culture Manager in Nolte. And as some context about me, I'm working in the tech area as an HR professional for now more over than 8 years. I'm always been studying about relationships and interactions in the workplace in particular. And inclusion and gender studies are my passion. So today we're going to talk about hiring process, and the question says, is your hiring process inclusive? So the idea is to give you some ideas on how to give underrepresented candidates an equal hiring experience. So what do we know about the hiring process? Many leaders and HR professionals know that the hiring process is one of the most important aspects of HR in any company. And also we know that during the last couple of years, with the increasing discussions and researches about inclusion and diversity, this became more special, even more, and that technology is changing everything and allow us to think about different and why not a better world where bias can be detected and minimized. So I would like to give you some common assumptions and an understanding of what is an unconscious bias. Maybe some of you are familiar, but it's curious that even though that we have new technologies and advanced ATS, which is like the hiring process that many companies use, and a ton of different sources when to look for talent, HR partners, no matter located where, hear about the same tips, tools, and assumptions when it comes to this topic. I've been working in Argentina because I'm Argentinian, and now in Mexico, and with the US market, and with the general in Latin America. And these unconscious bias are repeated among the whole world, but especially here. So let's talk about the most common ones whenever we screen candidates or whenever we do interviews. And the approach is simply full of this. So the first one is called the job hopper. The job hopper is that person that maybe if you jump from one job to another in a short period of time, that is called a job hopper. For the recruiters and people that usually do screenings, it is automatically means that you won't be fully committed to a new job. So it means that recruiters won't have time for understanding why you made those decisions. So they would just reject you, basically. The next one is called personal data judges. That is, for example, if you're a woman around 30 planning to have a family, just be careful with that because recruiters will do judgments for free about that. In the US, it's more careful that, and the law protects a lot of this. But in Latin America, actually, we still pay attention to the photos in the resume and to your personal data, where you lived, and a lot of things. It should be connected with your talent or if you are a good candidate. The next one, it's called banks versus cool companies. So this is especially in the tech industry. If you're working at a bank or any traditional telecommunication company, and you will probably won't match with our positions. If you didn't work at least one of the respected tech companies, something is wrong with you. So we are not going to take the time. The next one, it's like privileged candidates versus potential or your potential. This means like if you didn't study, don't even apply. We don't have room for people from outside the academic world in general. So that is a bias, very hard one. The last one is called 40-year-old coders. So for the recruiters, they would say, please don't tell me you are more than 40 years old and you still want to code. What happened in your career? So as you can see, rejecting candidates because you didn't attend a specific school, or if you live far away from the office, or candidates have an ethnic sounding name. It's super common. None of that should be a factor into the first part of the screening process when deciding whether to contact a candidate. So in order to prevent an inherent bias from the rejecting and otherwise perfectly good candidate, start the screening process by focusing on the attributes that are required for the job. As we as interviewers have a critical role and a great responsibility. 1 second. Okay, here's Superman. Sorry, Spider-Man. So it says a great power comes with a great responsibility. So we, not only HR or leaders, but everybody who is involved in the interview process has this responsibility, and you are responsible to for fighting against these biases. Define if you want to be aligned or alienated must be our first job on a daily basis when interviewing. So it's change the paradigm. So the idea is to, we know that we'll never be free from bias, but using a diversity recruitment strategy that focuses on our actions and that holds us accountable to our peers will help us improve. So each time I identify personally bias around the educational and professional background, the idea is to challenging the status quo and really invest in training people to be more empathetic, gain more and more strength. So the next slide. Okay, so what could you do starting today? First of all, work on it. Train yourself. There's a lot of diversity trainings online. There's a Microsoft training. There's an option. I have material for that if you want. Understand your own biases, could be because it's very different, like from someone who lives in the US or in Mexico or in any other country. You'll have different biases, and that's fine, but you need to work on defeating them. Educate yourself. That's the start point. In terms of company, you have to plan your diversity and inclusion strategy, as we do in Nolte, actually. So the idea is to evaluate the workplace through discussion groups, surveys, and perhaps independent consultants. The idea is as companies, we need to ensure that we are providing environments where underrepresented people can flourish and become leaders, basically. Then what happened with the job posting? Before screenings and before everything, you have a job posting. So is this just for men? If it is, or at least in how you can identify this, it's explicitly invite underrepresented people to apply in the body of your job post. There is a specific words that studies shown that women or men can feel identified with. So take a look at that, and there's a lot of research around this. And also there's, for example, a great tool that is called Textio, that it analyzes your job postings for gender or otherwise non-inclusive language. So you can use Textio for a language analysis of your company's writings that includes a bias meter. That's how it evaluates. It reflects how inclusive your language is. Then do you run whiteboard interviews for every role? So the whiteboard interviews are fine, but we have to take into consideration that they evaluate candidates' knowledge for a very specific thing, algorithms or data structures, with no consideration of the rest of their skills. So if that's the main objective, that's okay, but you have to have that in mind. And also, there's another, maybe not more complicated, but more something that you have to take into consideration when it comes to gender, because perhaps a man that it's more used to do exercises in a whiteboard, and he's used to that kind of pressure in the real time. It won't be the same for a woman that perhaps is starting coding or is not very familiar with that kind of environment. So take that into consideration. The next one is understand the minorities in your community. So basically get in contact with Facebook groups, meetups, GoToMeetups, organizations. So try to get in touch with them, sponsor their events, as we do in Nolte actually. Get to know them and open your business to them. It is a win-win situation, and the best talented people will want to work with you. The next one that I point out is embrace a growth mindset. So the idea is to, as recruiters and leaders, we have to embrace this. Go beyond what you know, try to understand the technical aspects so you can grow with the industry and within the company as well. The last one is reduce assumptions. Try to develop a genuine interest in knowing people and their stories. Always keep in mind that there is much more than a profile. Challenge yourself in this. So this seems all good and the good thing to do, but why? Like, why do we do this? So it's simple. There's more to diversity than making your company more appealing to work for. Organizations with a diverse workforce outperform their non-diverse counterparts by an average of 35%. Better gender diversity also leads to a 14% net profit. So this is proven. Research shows that gender diverse teams performs better than single gender teams. Make gender diversity a business priority can lead to a financial benefit and help a company realize its full potential. As it says here, well, the uncomfortable truth is that the technology industry today is not a place in which everyone of any gender, race, disability, religion, sexuality, social, economic background can thrive and succeed. It is not just a coincidence that here in Nolte, 40% of the engineering team are women. It takes a lot of work, passion, and conviction, and we are still learning on the way. And as what I think is that we have the unique opportunity of revalue the concept of candidate experience, trying each candidate, each person as we like to be treated as customers. Details makes a huge difference, and challenging old and improbable beliefs will generate the inflation point in the way that companies recruit people. So all this is also about inclusion and diversity. So any questions, comments? Thank you so much for listening.
My question would be, what are your thoughts about companies enforcing like certain metrics of what the diversity inside the company should be? Like, oh, we should achieve for 25% of women working at the workplace, or you know, I've seen a lot of companies like Microsoft or Facebook that have been publicly shamed for having really low diversity in their teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just to make the public happy, they're just hiring people to make this work. You know? So what would your opinion be on that?
Okay, well, I will repeat the question. Mao is asking, what is my thoughts about these huge companies that have metrics around diversity, like Microsoft, that perhaps in reality is not because they really want to do that, but because they are by law, they have to do it. So, well, some thoughts around that. I think there's two different scenarios. One is a corporation that has a lot of people, and they have a huge responsibility of aligned to the law to that. So if they don't want to do it because they don't feel passionate about it, but they have to, it's much better to do it in that way. If they don't even believe on that and have to do it, okay, but do it, because there's a minority that it's suffering from exclusion in a workplace, in this case women in tech, or people from another backgrounds, or people of color, depending on the minority in the space. So like the minimum amount of people from that minority to have it is and they are just because they have to, it's okay. In our case, we do it because we really believe on that, and there's nobody pointing out or any law or anybody saying that we have to do it. It's because we really believe on that. Perhaps the consequence of not really believing on that is that people from those minorities working in those places won't be a great place to work for them, because their perhaps processes won't be focused on how to reduce the gender. For instance, if they have a percentage that they have to fill in their hiring process, and they have like 2 women in a group of 30 or whatever men engineers, it will be complicated for them to adapt in a group that it's not focused on improving their working space, and or people are not trained to treat women in technology. There's a lot of things that it's not, it can be isolated. So depending on how the company do it, it could be a good experience, a good candidate and employee experience, or just a mess. But for me, it's better to have at least the law, making them hiring these minorities than nothing. Because if that doesn't exist, they won't just do anything to reduce the gap. So that's the thought. Okay, there's another question. It says, you mentioned social media groups. Is checking a candidate's profile on social media a lead to reject or accept them? Okay, there's a lot of opinions around this. If you ask me, I think if I understood the question correctly, like checking a social media profile, that's not what I meant. So checking a social media profile is discrimination. Like I don't agree that checking a personal profile and seeing I don't know any personal information should affect the recruitment process. What I said is get in touch with communities that is different, that perhaps there's women in tech, that is a community and they have a Facebook page, or I don't know, whatever, like Black women in Agile in the US. Those are communities that can be found in social media, of course, not checking the social profiles. There is recruiters used to do, there's a lot of recruiters that do that, and a lot of companies that do that. For me, it's horrible, and I witnessed that, and I just raised my thoughts, but there's nothing that you can do if the company doesn't have any penalties for that, or if they are aligned to that. So yeah, I think I answered the question.
Thank you.
Any other question?
I have one question. Yeah, and if you could just repeat it, like in the thing, because I'm logged in, but I'm logged in multiple times, so it's not going to come through. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
My question is, it's obviously an issue to hire like the right people for the right jobs in many companies, and while making diversity and inclusion is a priority for us, we're a smaller company where I think it's a bit easier. That's like an assumption, but I'm curious if you have insights around like supply in the workforce or some of these other companies, or like what's being done to I guess bring more diverse talent into companies. I know that there's like
many different organizations that are focused on that, but is that enough? Then, will there? I guess on my main question is like, will there be enough supply to keep diverse teams? And is that a bigger issue that starts at the beginning? If not enough people are getting trained with the right amount of skills to be employable in environment. Because being able to be capable and do the job, I think, is really important as well.
Exactly. I think, okay, I'm gonna repeat the question. It's if there are sufficient supply to meet, you can just correct me if I'm wrong, but to meet the expectations of the hiring when you are focusing on diversity and inclusion. Is this right? Okay. That is hard. We are in a moment that, especially in technology, that, for instance, women are getting into the market. There is not a lot of women that are maybe very senior, or the workforce is not fully prepared to find senior women to hire. And as I try to mention, it's like focus on the potential of the candidate and their skills and attributes. It's super important. I'm positive that focusing on diversity can give you some ideas and get you creative on finding new talent and attract that people. That doesn't mean that that we'll have like a huge team with 50% of engineers, senior engineers right now. That's I don't think that's possible. But whenever you find those little gaps and places where you can focus on hiring, but maybe I don't know. Let's say a minority right now, it's a transsexual. So if you have the opportunity to hire a transsexual, maybe for an administrative work, or just try to open your tools and open your mind and give the chance to have an interview with that person. So I'm being positive that this is something that will revert in a couple of years, but it's you're right that it's not something that is possible to achieve in right now in the near future. We're working, I think, on future generations, for future generations, and for us, it's a challenge. But I think it's the right thing to do, and as a business, for a business perspective, it's a good thing to do as well. I don't know if I answered the question.
I think so, but in short, you're saying because there hasn't been enough time where this has been really a focus for many companies. There's definitely a lack of supply.
Yeah.
You're saying like your recommendation is to focus on the potential of a candidate if you're looking to build diverse teams. I know that's also like one thing that's more challenging for us as a small company, is having the ability to like train within now, but I think that companies can play a really major role in building and developing diverse workforce, within the company, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a hard thing. I mean, I've seen this not only now in the tech company, but before in the banking industry. I've seen biases, and not very unconscious, like real biases around people of color and people from different backgrounds. So I think it's a huge thing, and there's some obvious things that can be changed right now, like you have to give the opportunity and educate your clients. For instance, if you are, I don't know, a consulting company, educate your clients and saying, hey, you don't need someone of blue eyes to be your I don't know, your salesman. It can be someone from with another background, and they will come. They will be great if they have the same background or same skills. So that's the idea. That's the main idea. Then we'll face new challenges like lack of perhaps very experienced people in a specific area, or leaders. There are lack of women leaders in general. So that's a fact. But yeah, step by step, I guess. So, okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and have a happy Friday. And right? Oh, next week. Okay. to all our LGBTQI friends. Happy Pride. So thanks, everybody. Oh, and last week was a Diversity Day as well. So happy Diversity Month. Have a great weekend, everybody.